All right, so welcome. It's our annual North Carolina Realtors residential forms review. Who's excited about the changes?
Yay.
Yes, come on. I love that enthusiasm. Let's celebrate change. Tupac loved change, right? Who wants to sing the song? That's just the way it is.
I bet Brandon does.
Good song.
All right, so what I'm going to do is pull this out so I have it to go through, and then I'm going to pull up the individual documents to show you guys. Okay, let's open it in 2 pages. All right, what can y'all see now? Because I can't. You can see
Your
dot, right?
dot loop
Dot
template.
loop.
Okay. All right. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right thing. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the link that I sent last week to that video. I'm also going to put this link in the chat to this document because it makes it really easy to go through and look at that. So you guys copy and paste that link into your browser so you've got it for reference, just if you want to double check it after this meeting. Okay. Basically, it's just going to take you to this page, and it's really only 4 pages of changes. And basically, it links to the different documents that the revisions are made in. And then the super cool thing is, yay, it's highlighted. So you see kind of what the difference, what the changes have been made are from the old documents. I put all the relevant documents in dot loop templates this morning. So everything should be there and ready to go in the new templates going forward. Now, if you've already created a loop, then the old documents are going to be in there, which are fine because I think you have 60 or 90 days to use the existing documents. So, I mean, basically you've got until the end of August. But if you create a new loop going forward, then the new documents should be in there. Okay. Now, there are also new documents that aren't in the loop templates that there might be placeholders for. So just make sure when you are going to look for documents to add that aren't in the templates, that you know where to look, and it's here. Okay. So you go under, you're here. You go to templates. You go to 2025-26 NCR Interactive Docs. And then you can search here for FHA or VA or, whatever that document is. So let's go through these. So the first document that's changed is the offer to purchase, okay? And I'm going to read this just to make sure you guys digest it a little bit, okay? Much like the residential agency agreements earlier this cycle, the 2T has been revised to make it easier to read and understand. All the note and warning boxes have been removed. If you remember, they had like those red boxes with text. They've taken all of those out. And the text that was in those boxes has been simplified and incorporated into the pre-existing text or guidelines. Spacing and formatting has been adjusted to make it easier to navigate. First page has been reformatted to make sure the important offer information all appears at the beginning of the form, which is nice. Because if you remember, like the closing costs were buried down on like page 11. Now it's up at the top. So all the financial stuff is right at the top. Okay. So click on the form 12T to see what the strikeouts and additions look like. You can do that on your own. The version of the link shows that highlights edits, but it does not show the strikeouts. Okay. So I'm going to reference here and then jump over to look at it. All right. So edits to note 1.1. The guidelines to this form have long said that seller concessions can be a flat dollar amount or a percentage. Many firms are using this line more often as part of their transactions. Why? Compensation, right? So it has been moved from page 11 to the first page. So 1.1. So you've got purchase price, you got the DD amount as usual. All of this, I believe, is the same. Seller concessions. This is what was buried way down.
It's so much better having it right there.
I liked it a lot.
So it's right there. It's very clear. So, hopefully you guys understand how to use this. If it's typical negotiation, you're asking for $5,000 in closing costs or whatever, etc., that's good. If they don't have, if you're negotiating the commission and you want it to be part of the closing cost, that's what the seller's that's why the buyer's asking for it, because it's not being offered. Then you could put the 2.4 or 2.5 or whatever right here. Does that make sense? And then you need to do the documentation on the back end so the attorney knows where it goes, right?
Okay,
Right.
so for example, if you need to negotiate a half more percent or 1% or whatever, you would just put it right there. Like if the seller's offering 2 and you want 2.5, you put 0.5 right there.
Yeah.
Okay, but you can't do both, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to do both.
Yeah, right. Okay,
I
perfect.
would do a total.
I've just never seen it come through as a percentage before. That's all.
I think they're making it easier because typically it's used for percentage with regard
Right.
to commission. But I mean, if they're asking for, 2K already for some repairs and then the 0.5% on top of it, we can just do the math and put in the dollar.
Put it together. Okay.
Any questions about that? This is about, okay, so 1.2 about escrow. This has, I mean, the language may have changed, but it's really nothing different. There's the attorney's still not going to release the escrow money or the earnest money, for example, unless there's a written agreement releasing it. Otherwise you're going to have to take some legal action, right? So that really hasn't changed, even though maybe the language has changed a little bit. Let's see, 1.3, the dots have changed.
Oh, the fixture section?
1H. Oh, no, I'm sorry. 2B, the bullets have been changed to match.
Yeah, the fixtures.
Yep. 2B have been the Form 101. Okay, so 5B. This is about contingency. So if you guys were around and doing this when there used to be a box on here that said it's contingent, what that did was triggered, because you would put in the end of due diligence. What that did was it triggered a termination automatically if the property that they needed to sell wasn't under contract by the end of due diligence. That was the way the contingency used to work in the offer to purchase. So it was automatic. So it took the risk away from the earnest money, because if it wasn't on a contract, the contract basically terminated already, so the earnest money was safe. They took that out a couple of years ago. So technically the contract isn't contingent, meaning nothing automatically triggers anything like a termination or the release of that earnest money, right? This is just letting the buyer or letting the seller know that, hey, we do need to sell this house to buy this house, right? But it's not automatic anymore. And
That
this just
makes sense.
this
Okay.
cleans that language up a little bit more. See, it doesn't, this subparagraph is a disclosure to buyer and does not, or by buyer, and does not make this contract contingent. So again, it's not in the contract to trigger anything. It's just notifying that this needs to happen. So what you need to be mindful of, if you've got somebody selling and they're not under contract as you approach the due diligence deadline, you either need to renegotiate that due diligence deadline to protect your buyer's earnest money if possible, or terminate, or at least have the conversation so they understand what to do and what's at risk. Does that make sense?
Can I ask you this question? So if a seller says, yes, we'll accept your offer, but your house has to be under contract by X day, or whatever.
Then you make that the due
provision.
diligence date, and you terminate that day if you can't renegotiate if it's not under contract that day.
But where would you put that verbiage? Like in additional provisions or something?
No, you just put the due diligence deadline, and then you better terminate if you want them to keep their earnest money.
But she's asking about a seller accepting an offer, right, Janine? If I'm
Yeah.
representing a seller,
Correct.
But I think it's the same thing, right?
It's the same thing.
The seller can't terminate at the due diligence deadline.
If a seller says, I will only move forward unless your house is under contract in 30 days, there's no contingency. if a seller will only, because what's the seller going to do? What if it takes 60 days for the house to go under? Like, if a seller wants that contingency, doesn't it have to be in writing, like additional provisions or something, since this is quote not contingent on the buyer on buyer selling?
I don't think there's a place for that in
There's
addition.
there's not a way for that. I think what we're gonna have to do is just educate our client that if you're interested in doing this, here's the risk to you. Whatever the closing date is, they've got 7 days after the closing date by which they can make this happen. You've got the closing date plus 7 days before you have an option by which to back out of this.
So that's what happened to my sister. She had a 4-month close, put her house up on the market, got it under contract. They terminated, and then she only had 30 days left until her closing date to go ahead and get it back under contract, and they got it by the skin of their teeth. So there's nothing, I mean, and then if she hadn't got it, she would have been in breach if that hadn't happened. But of course, there's nothing in writing anywhere that says house has to be under contract by X day, is what Doug's saying, because it's not contingent. So that's, I was just wondering, like, is there a way to protect a seller?
If buyer and seller wish to make this contract contingent on the sale of buyer's other property, then the parties should attach any draft
Okay.
custom addendum.
There you go. Okay.
If you get to that point, ask your favorite attorney if they've got a standard document to use that says buyer and seller agree that as part of the whatever, that the buyer's home has to be under contract by X date.
Okay.
I
Or
didn't know
contract
that
terminate.
to do
I
that,
mean,
so
I
I'm glad
like
you
the
asked
way it
that.
was before because it was
Tough shit. Yeah.
I mean, it was better. It said, okay, you got to be under contract by now or it's over. Of course, you
Right.
can always renegotiate that,
Right.
but they took that out.
Right. It gives the seller a little bit more protection there to get out. Because like Brandon said, once seller signed, they're done. They're stuck.
Yeah, I think the old one did. Yeah, this does.
Yeah. Right.
Okay, we good with okay, that's what we were talking about right here. Okay, 6A. This paragraph used to be located under purchase price on the first and second pages. It's been moved here and broken into parts. The mechanics of the language are the same. If the buyer fails to timely deliver monies, then there's not necessarily an automatic breach of the contract. Okay, we're talking about due diligence and earnest money here, right? Rather, the seller must make a written demand, which can be done with Form 355, and then the buyer will have 1 banking day to cure the default before the seller has a right to terminate. Everybody understand what's happening there? So you can't just automatically terminate as a seller because you didn't get that due diligence money on day 1 or because that earnest money wasn't delivered by day 5 to the attorney. If that happens and the seller wishes to terminate, and obviously you're not having communication, which seems like something good is going to happen, then you have to give them written notice and then use the form.
Okay, so there is a form to send written notice for that. Don't just send an email.
Yes, 355.
355. Got it.
Hopefully you never have to use that document, but just so you know. And for reference, that language, because how many forms are there, so you don't forget, is right there if you need to go get it. Any questions about that? Now, unfortunately, it doesn't give any extra protection if the buyer terminates and hasn't delivered the due diligence. None of that language has really changed.
So what do you do? And I know this happens a lot. What do you do? I mean, honestly, you send a check in the mail with tracking all the things and it's late or whatever. Obviously, they're making good effort to get the money to them, but they can't control that. Hopefully people aren't sending these notices in that situation.
No, hopefully not. I mean, that's just about
Yeah.
That's why you need to make sure that you're asking for tracking information
Yeah.
for your buyers and when you're representing a seller. They're mailing a check. Don't just send it USPS without
Overnight.
tracking information.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, make sure, because this happened to me, that your sellers have an account that they can deposit it into.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Any questions about that? All right, 7C. Sometimes agents mistakenly fill out these blanks with the same information twice by numbering the associations. It's hoped that agents will realize that they only need to fill in the blanks for each applicable association. So you don't put HOA here twice. You don't,
Jesus Christ, people do that.
Gee.
that's pretty,
Oh my God.
it's like, I was watching
Jesus
this thing the
Christ.
other day and it's like, unfortunately, there's a reason that the bleach bottle says do not drink on it, right?
Oh, good God.
Okay.
I have yet to have a property with 2 HOAs.
It's common for condos, so a lot more common.
Oh, right.
Very common
Townhomes.
here. Very common.
So yeah. I don't know if there's any questions about that. Looks like they added maybe 2 tanks here. That's really the major points listed here. I mean, of course, make sure you read it. I would go through and look at the yellow stuff, but I mean, those are the high points of what you need to make sure that you're aware of. Okay. Obviously, it shows when was updated. If you see a form that says 2024 or 2023 over here or earlier, make sure there's not a newer form. Okay. Just trying to make sure there's nothing here. I think we've all been around long enough to hopefully know how to talk about wire fraud and make sure that you're not sharing wire information and that you tell your clients to take it directly from the attorney. I'm not going to go over the revision of the guidelines for doing the offer to purchase. Feel free to look at that on your own. Backup contract addendum. I know we don't use these a lot. If you do, make sure you're using the new form, okay? FHA addendum, VA addendum, there's been a little bit of an update to that, so let's take a look at that. Basically saying that they can't be forced to buy the property and that they're due a refund of their earnest money if they terminate. If it doesn't appraise.
They edited the water well part.
Yes. Certain inspections. Let's keep it as broad as possible, right?
Yeah, because pest inspection wasn't on there before, probably.
Mm. So now you don't have to have the water well tested?
No, you do. It's making it more
No.
blanket, saying there's probably more than just a water that's covered,
It
that's
leaves it
required.
open for the lender to
Just
tell you.
leaving it open for
I
the
got you.
lender.
Buyer possession before closing. So all of these right here seem to be about unpairing smart devices upon possession. So whether it's buyer possession before closing, seller possession after closing, additional provisions, all 3 of those, seller needs to unpair devices once the buyer takes possession or once they give up possession if they have it after closing. So make sure you make your people aware of that, because I've had sellers that, it took like 3 weeks for the buyer to be able to get access because they didn't unpair their stuff.
Yeah.
This is not dissimilar from, hey, make sure you return your cable box or your modem or whatever, right? Agreement to amend. A new paragraph has been added to remove a buyer or seller, and the text in the due diligence period has been adjusted so that the new date can be either extended or shortened instead of only extended. So we've had this before. Oh, she doesn't need to be on there. He's the only one that needs to be on the document. So you got it right here. Likewise, if you've had to add somebody, I've had buyers whose parents were going to help, but they weren't going to be on the deed, but then the lender requires that they be on the contract. Same thing here. So add or subtract. Any questions about that? And you see they struck this change to 5 p.m. instead of extend through 5 p.m. All right, let me get back to where we were. Okay, so this is about the vacant land document. A lot of the changes are similar to what's on the residential document. So I would just say review that. Okay. Other right, exclusive right to sell listing agreement. All right, let's see. 7B, the line for other fees has been expanded and a checkbox for a fee schedule has been included. Firms that wish to specify different commission rates for an unrepresented buyer or single agent dual agency should use this option.
Oh.
So retainer, percentage, which is typical. Firm's fee schedule attached if we want to do something like that. You know, I don't see any reason to complicate this. What I would highly suggest you do is that you use this box for our commission and you use seller may offer instead of firm. Seller may offer and then the percentage that you're listing on the 220.
Okay, that's what we're doing now. Okay.
That's what I would suggest you do instead of combining it here. And now you see
Oh,
this is
okay.
optional. Total
That's
cost.
gone.
You don't have
Okay.
to add them together. You could to help them clarify, but hopefully you're doing that on the net sheet anyways. So it's very clear. Any questions about that?
Okay, to clarify, 7B, second checkbox, what we're making.
Yes.
And then C, number 2, yep, is what they're offering the buyer's agent. And then D is those two added together. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty similar to the new listing agreement. I do like 7D, the total cost, just so there's absolutely
Same.
no ambiguity whatsoever. I like doing that. I think it makes sense, but
Yeah.
obviously they've got it marked as optional now.
So Doug, when would you use the last firm's fee scale? Oh, that's if the firm is doing something different. Never mind. Okay.
Let's see, 7G. This is just regards with like if an entity is involved. 11B. Hopefully we know what to use here. Any
Always
questions?
checking that third box. Yeah.
So this line.
Yep. And the last line. Yeah.
That's
Got
what
it.
we
Yep. Yep.
use that every time unless your client specifically requests no designated dual agency. But also help them understand that, okay, you know. Any questions about that?
One thing, Doug, to touch, if I can share on that real quick, because I did, I remember this in CE. You make sure you're checking the box to explain dual agency, even if it's designated dual agency on working with real estate agents. Because if you sign a listing agreement and you've got them allowing dual agency and that file gets audited for some reason and they check working with real estate agents and you did not check that box, you got a problem. There's people that have been in people that have gotten in trouble for that over the last year. So make sure you're covering your bases. Even if they won't allow you to do designated dual agency, and I have had several people in the last 2 or 3 years that won't because they've been burnt by dual agency in the past. You need to at least show that you've explained it to them. At least that's how it was explained to me in CE last year.
I think
Wait, time out.
the box that is going to be checked on the agency agreement should be the same box that's checked on working with real estate agents.
Okay.
Right, Doug. So I've only been checking designated dual on
That's the
working
only
with.
one you should check.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They say,
Okay.
unless they
Okay.
say
Okay.
otherwise.
I
Don't
was
check
confused
both.
for a second. Okay, perfect.
Thank you for clarifying that, Brandon. okay, I'm not going to go over the guidelines for the sale agreement because we just went through it. I'm not going to go over the exclusive right to sell listing agreement for land. It's going to be redrafted to match the other residential listing agreement. Okay, so the language that's changed is going to be the language that's changed on the other one. Okay. The estimated net sheet. All right, love this. So, a lot more information in here now, although, you know, a lot of it isn't going to be paid for by the seller. It still gives you the option to put stuff in here. This is what's different because I used to put, well, I have been putting the buyer agency compensation on the other line for my sellers. So now you put, you know, our fee here and then what they're offering to the buyer agent there.
Oh, the current one, it's just, it's the total fee. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So
Just
this
that's
gives
what-
you now a second document where it very clearly going
Okay, so they've just split it up. Okay.
because
I like that, Doug. I like that you've been doing that. I haven't even thought about that, but
Same.
I think that's a great
Same.
idea, especially with the way the documents have changed. And it's nice that they've done that for us.
and
Yeah, I've
hopefully
only
it
been
will
doing it as
populate
one.
automatically like the rest of these do. I don't know if it will or not, but hopefully it will.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good to know.
And the rest of this should be this, you know, the same. I mean, we're not using some of these. Do make sure you're doing prorated taxes for folks. All right. Any other questions about the net sheet?
No, oh, looks good.
Okay. Vacant land disclosure. Just looks like the initials were added for the buyer and the seller instead of it just being something that had a bunch of check boxes on it. Buyer agency agreement. If there's a bonus, it's in here. Again, typically you're signing this before you show a property and before you know if a bonus is being offered.
Yeah,
Not sure that you would know at the time that you do this.
yeah. That was that was gonna be my question. Yeah.
It's on here.
Well, I guess if you're in this situation, instead of like if you take someone out to new construction and they're offering a bonus, whatever, I guess you could now just go through and add this and have that change initialed as opposed to filling out the 770.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Would you agree, Doug?
This one is already done. Come back, fill this in, and then initial buy it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose you could do that.
And I think you could do that also on one of the other agreements that we saw. Is it the listing agreement? If you had it, we'll just leave them separate. I don't want to make it more confusing than it is.
So potentially. So what I will tell you is that, okay, so this is just redrafted, same as this. This is the guidelines. Okay.
Oh, it was the agreement to if you negotiated closing costs after, you know, if you win a deal straight up, no closing costs, and then after repairs, you negotiate $3,500 in closing costs. I guess then you could go back to page 1 of the OTP, add that in, and have that initialed instead of generating another document.
You're talking about the 4T?
We're gonna get to that in just a minute. So just hold that thought, okay? There's a new, hold on, I want to make sure I didn't miss something. I don't think I did. Unilateral termination. There's how many termination documents are there? Several. So the buyer can now terminate contracts with from either a 2T or a 12T. So you don't have to have a different termination.
One form instead of two. Yeah.
Or a home, right? There's just the one. Got it? Same thing, the reverse from seller to buyer. In the event that you've notified them that they didn't deliver the due diligence or the earnest money, and then when, all of that, etc. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Another termination agreement, parties wish to sign an agreement to terminate the contract and sending a unilateral termination. This form may be used to document the terms on which the party agrees. So like release of earnest money, etc. Any questions about that? All right, agency agreement amendment. This is what we were kind of referencing a little bit earlier, and I've added this to the loop now, okay? Because I think I would prefer that you don't go back and edit the original agency agreement document, okay? So you've got an extension here. Okay, I'm going to extend.
I forgot this form existed.
I mean, we probably don't use it a lot because it's just easy to go in and edit the agency agreement.
Yeah.
But this is probably a cleaner and better way to do it, in the same way that you don't want to mark up the original purchase. So if you want to extend your agency agreement date, then you can do it here. This is compensation firm's fee if they're paying you directly, or if the cooperative compensation is changing. Okay. So say you've got, 2.5 on the agency agreement, but the builder is offering 3. So you can come in here and click cooperative compensation and change it to 3.
Okay. Yeah, I just changed my listing or my buyer's agreement to 3 when I found that out. Okay, sounds good.
I'm sorry, I had to step out for a minute. Did you say you were adding this to the loop template? Did I hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think
right below the agency agreement in the agency folder if you need to make a change to it.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, so this is for
that's great.
Seller or buyer. Got it. Okay.
I only put it in the buyer loop.
Okay, but we can use this for.
You could if you needed to.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because I just had to extend my list agreement and I just did an edit and sent it to JBoard, but we should have actually used this paper. Okay.
And just make sure you don't just fill out the documents here. You click the right.
Correct.
And put in the date that it was signed.
Got it. Okay.
Any questions about that? Oh, I know what I was going to say. I'm not talking about this one because I suggest you don't use it.
Yeah.
And
who does that?
Not me.
Oh, this is, so I've come across this or heard of you guys coming across this. Lenders or attorneys wanting proof of what your buyer has agreed to pay you or something like that. So you could use this document instead of sharing your agency agreement. So say you've got a buyer, you go under contract on a house, seller's not offering anything. And your buyers agreed to pay you the 2 point whatever. Okay. What you would do is you would fill this out, have your client sign this or not, because it's not required. You see, it's optional, and share it to the attorney or the lender or whoever needs to see it. Any questions about that?
So this would be used in lieu of that attorney drafted thing saying they're making up the difference?
Yes, it could be.
Got it. Okay.
This is an NC form that you could use.
Yeah. Okay, God,
Questions about that?
Well, as I understood it, that's only if you wanted to keep any other information privy on your agency agreement. If you're okay with sharing it, then you share it.
Yeah, and I think my default is going to be here's the agency agreement. Well,
yeah.
I don't see that in that document. It just seems like more work.
Yeah.
But it's there, whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Got it.
They eliminated the 770. The 710 is what.
Okay. Good catch.
Offer to purchase a contract new construction. Technical edits been made. Same thing reflected on this form for new construction, I think. That's it.
This isn't terrible. Yeah.
I think these are all good changes. I think
Same.
the last 2 or 3
Easier.
years, they've done a very good job of making changes that make sense.
Yeah. Less is more.
I
Less is
certainly
more.
don't hate that the offer to purchase is now 14 pages
Same.
from 17. I like that it's going in the opposite direction.
Yeah. And the buyer agency agreement's only 3 instead of 7.
Yeah. So, I mean, we need to simplify this stuff for people, and hopefully that's what, this is all accomplishing.
I think the listing agreement is really short now too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't hate these changes.
So, that's really the long and short of the form changes that are most prevalent. Like I've said, I've added the ones that are required to our loop template, so they are good to go for now. Does anybody have any questions or want to discuss the form changes any further?
I did receive an offer on the new OTP and I was like, what's happening? And I was like, oh, okay, this is nice.
Yes, I'm glad that you did, because that prompted me when you reached out to remember that forms change every July.
Oh,
And I haven't looked yet, and now we're here. So probably still ahead of the curve. Thank you for that.
Are the disclosures still the same? The property disclosures, Doug?
Or as I know,
Did those change?
I mean,
Okay,
they just
perfect.
changed those earlier this year. So
Yeah, exactly. They're 6 pages. Okay.
I will try to get these in the seller and buying guides, although I'm really inclined, honestly, now, just for the purpose of having to update it constantly, from having those forms and those documents, and we can just provide them. I'm going to think about that, but at least they're in the loops, and when you create a new loop, the updated documents are in there to use.
We can always email them to our clients from the loop.
Any questions?
Oh, good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for going over these. These are good.
Just need to start slinging some more deals to be able to use them.
Right?
That's the goal. Let's see.